If you've been scrolling through endless rows of high-end laptops, watching endless spec sheets, and still can't tell which machine will actually let you finish a 4K video edit without the dreaded lag, you're not alone. The market is flooded with bold claims: ultra-fast GPU, AI-boosted CPU, OLED masterpiece, and it's easy to feel paralyzed, especially when the price tags hover near the five-figure mark. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon, and in the next few minutes I'm going to walk through the real-world experience of the ASUS ProArt P16 so you can decide if it's the right investment for your workflow or just another shiny piece of metal. First, let's talk about why a creator-focused laptop still matters to a gamer or a hybrid professional. The ProArt P16 isn't trying to be a gaming beast in the traditional sense. It's built around the idea that rendering, compositing, and real-time playback demand the same raw horsepower that modern AAA titles require. That's why ASUS paired an AMD Ryzen 9 HX processor with a GeForce RTX 5070. In practice, this combo means you can open Premiere Pro, load a 12-track audio timeline, and drop a 4K RAW clip onto the track, then scrub through the footage at near real-time speed. In my own test, the timeline stayed responsive even when I added multiple adjustment layers and a color-grade LUT. For a gamer who also streams or does video editing on the side, that responsiveness is a huge win. No need to juggle a separate workstation. The display is where the ProArt really stakes its claim. The 16-inch 3K OLED Lumina panel runs at 120 Hz and supports touch, which feels surprisingly natural for drawing or navigating complex UI elements. What matters beyond the headline numbers is color accuracy out of the box. When I calibrated the screen with a basic X-Rite calibration tool, the delta E dropped into the sub-2 range, meaning the reds, blues, and greens you see are practically studio-ready without spending hours tweaking. For a photographer editing Lightroom catalogs, that level of fidelity translates directly into fewer re-exports and less back and forth with a desktop monitor. Gamers benefit too. HDR content looks punchier, and the 120 Hz refresh makes fast-paced shooters feel smoother, even though the OLED's inherent response time already eliminates ghosting. Now, the practical side of storage and memory. 4 terabytes of SSD space sounds obscene, but it's actually a thoughtful choice for people who work with massive raw footage, 3D assets, or a library of games that easily exceed 2 terabytes. The drives are NVMe, so copying a 30 GB project file to a backup drive took just under a minute, which is a noticeable time-saver compared to older SATA-based laptops. The 32 GB of LPDDR5X RAM isn't just a brag. When you're multitasking between a game, a streaming encoder, and Photoshop. You'll see those extra gigabytes keep the system from swapping to the SSD, preserving that buttery smooth feel. In real life, I ran a 4-hour gaming session while simultaneously rendering a 1080p video in the background, and the system never hiccuped. One feature that often gets lost in the hype is the ASUS dial pad. It's a small, detachable touchpad with a physical dial that you can program to control timeline scrubbing, brush size in Clip Studio Paint, or even volume in a voice chat app. I mapped it to zoom in and out of the video timeline, and the difference was immediate. No need to reach for keyboard shortcuts while my hands were already on the mouse. For creators who love tactile controls, it's a subtle productivity boost. Gamers may find it less useful, but those who enjoy using macro keys for quick weapon swaps or inventory management can still assign the dial pad to those functions, making it a flexible accessory. Of course, no laptop is perfect, and the ProArt P16 does have trade-offs you should be aware of before pulling the trigger. The first is weight. At just under 6 pounds, it's heavier than the typical 15-inch Ultrabook, meaning you'll feel it on your lap during a marathon editing session, but it's also less convenient to carry around campus or a coffee shop all day. The chassis is built to MILST 810H standards, which gives it resilience against drops and spills, but the added reinforcement contributes to that heft. If you travel constantly and need a featherlight machine for flights, you might be better off with a thinner, less rugged alternative. Battery life is another practical consideration. The 96Wh battery provides roughly 4 hours of mixed usage: some light browsing, a bit of video playback, and occasional Photoshop work. That's decent for a workstation-grade laptop, but far from the all-day endurance you'd expect from a consumer notebook. If you plan to game or render on battery, you'll notice the power draw quickly depletes the charge, so keeping the charger handy is essential. The downside is the proprietary charger is fairly bulky, which adds to the overall bag weight. Thermal performance is impressive, but not flawless. The ProArt's cooling system uses a dual-fan, vapor chamber design that keeps the CPU and GPU temps in the 80-90°C range under sustained load. You'll hear the fans ramp up noticeably during long gaming sessions or intensive 3D renders, which can be distracting.